Do you want your story to be about tonight?
How a kid that always wanted to fly, but when he got very old, he got to fly.
But you have to lay in bed and try to sleep, okay?
Okay.
This is the story about a kid named Peter from far, far away in the past, hundreds and hundreds of years, before basic things like electricity had been discovered, let alone flight. And of course, Peter would see insects and birds fly, but no one dare think that a person could fly. You have to imagine that back then, people were of much more simple minds than what we are right now, in the sense that they thought that the nature of a man or of a human, a woman too, was more related to an animal than to what we know as people today. In the sense that if humans had physical limitations, that was the end of the story. So a human couldn't go more than 15 miles an hour because nobody can run that fast. They had never thought about, uh, you know, things like a car or a road. They had nothing. It was very, very, very simple life. But Peter really wanted to fly. When he was a kid, he told his parents about this. And his parents laughed it out and said, Peter, you're not a bird, so you will never fly. And that disappointed Peter a lot because he had a sense that that was not true, that he could fly. However, he was also very put down by their parents' comments, and so he decided not to push the issue. However, years went by, and he never really let go of the dream of flying. When he was a teenager, there were no schools back then. Life was extremely simple, so he tried to study the birds and understand how they flew, but he couldn't figure it out. I mean, yes, of course, clearly he could see how the birds were flapping their wings, but he didn't understand that. And there were no scientists. There was no. He didn't even know how to read and write back then because he was just part of a villager, and there was no history beyond perhaps some stories that your parents or your grandparents would tell you. There was no academia, there were no schools, there was no university, there were no books, there was no internet, of course, there was no internet, there was no computers, there was nothing. So all he had was his simple mind, and as much as he tried to study the birds, he could figure out how to turn himself into a bird, which is what he thought he needed to do. And so the years passed, and he became a young boy, and he still wanted to fly. And he he became really close with this girl, and they got together, and they decided that they wanted to live together, and they enjoyed their company a lot, and they even were planning on having a baby of their own. And so he decided, I trust this woman a lot. I'm going to tell her about my dream to fly. By this time, he was already like 22 years old. And so he told her about his dream of flying, about how he wanted to fly for his whole life. And she started laughing at him. And she basically told him the same thing his parents had told him when he was about your age. When they said, oh, ha ha ha, you're not a bird, Peter. Come on, stop with your nonsense and tend to the farm or the house or whatever. And he felt hurt by this woman because she didn't enjoy his passion and his dreams And he felt also that people around him were very simple and that there had to be a way. But he also decided never to tell anybody else in his whole life. And so it happened that his whole life went by with him always being the weird guy that stares at the birds, and nobody knew why he was always staring at the birds and the bees. And it's because he really wanted to fly, but he never, ever, ever could. And one day, when he was very old, he laid in bed and his body stopped working. And so, suddenly, he saw himself lifting out of his body, and he saw an old man in the bed. And he thought, that old man, he's really old, and he's not moving much. And suddenly he realized that was his body. He said, but that's not me. I'm here. How can I be there and here at the same time? I don't understand this. And so but he realized he was floating. And that frightened him incredibly. He realized for the first time ever he was flying. And so he decided to go outside of his house and start flying. And suddenly he could fly. He flew everywhere. He spent a lot of time flying, years and years and years, until he found friends that were also part of the other dimensions outside of this body. And those friends helped him continue his journey. And Peter was extremely, extremely happy that he could finally fulfill his dream and fly.